Favor couldn't forget what she shared with Isaac that day. She loved every minute they spent together. The way he made her feel, the way he looked at her, it was perfect. She wished this pregnancy hadn't happened. It wasn't supposed to turn out this way. The worst part wasn't just the pregnancy. It was the thought of how she was going to tell her family. How would they react when they found out that Isaac, her cousin, was the father? How would her dad feel? The disappointment on his face was something she couldn't bear to imagine. And what about Isaac? How would he feel? Would he be angry? Would he blame her for what happened? Or would he stand by her, even when the truth came out? The questions were endless, and the answers seemed so far away. But deep down, Favor couldn't help but shift the blame. She blamed her parents. They were the ones who had made their intimate moments so open, so obvious. If they hadn't done that, she believed she would never have started feeling this way, never would have had these thoughts. It was their fault for making her see things she wasn't ready to understand. Still, despite the shame and the fear, one thing was clear to Favor. She loved Isaac, and to her, that was all that mattered. Mama Favor waited until her husband came back that night. "My husband," Mama Favor began carefully, "you know Favor has been sick for a while now. I took her to the hospital, hoping it was just a minor illness." She paused, her voice shaking. "But the doctor told me something else. Favor is pregnant." The words hung in the air like a bomb. Papa Favor's eyes widened in shock. "What?" he shouted, standing up so quickly that his chair nearly toppled over. "Who is responsible for this pregnancy?" he demanded, his voice loud and sharp as he turned to look at Favor. Favor's legs felt weak. Her mouth went dry, and tears welled up in her eyes. "Papa, it's Isaac," she stammered, barely able to get the words out. "Which Isaac?" he asked, his voice rising even more. His anger was now mixed with confusion. Favor hesitated, then whispered, "Isaac, my cousin brother." The moment the words left her mouth, Papa Favor's hand flew across her face, with a loud slap. Favor gasped, holding her cheek, as tears streamed down her face. "What do you mean?" he shouted furiously. "You are pregnant for your cousin's brother?" Mama Favor stood in silence, her head bowed. Her heart was heavy, but she couldn't bring herself to speak. She wanted to defend her daughter, to explain, but the words just wouldn't come. Papa Favor, unable to contain his anger, stormed out of the house and headed straight to Papa Isaac's apartment. His steps were heavy, and his voice was already booming before he reached the door. "John," he screamed. "Come out here. Come and see what your son has done to my daughter." His voice echoed through the compound, drawing the attention of neighbors. He was shaking with rage, his face red with fury. "I will never forgive Isaac," he shouted. "He has destroyed my daughter's career. He has ruined her dreams." John finally came out of the house, looking confused and concerned. He had no idea what was happening, but the anger in Papa Favor's voice told him it was something serious. "Your son Isaac got my daughter Favor pregnant." These words shocked John to his core. He couldn't believe what his ears had just heard. His face tightened with disbelief and anger as he processed the shocking news. Without hesitation, he called out, "Mama Isaac! Come here with Isaac now." The two families gathered outside under the pale moonlight. The air was thick with tension as silence and shame took hold of everyone present. Nobody dared to speak, but the weight of the situation was unbearable. John's anger was like a fire burning wildly inside him. His voice roared as he shouted at Isaac, his rage so fierce that it seemed like he might strike the boy. John stormed toward Isaac with clenched fists, intending to teach him a painful lesson. But before he could act, his wife stepped in, standing between him and their son. "No, my husband," she cried out, her hands raised to stop him. "There are better ways to handle this. Beating him will not change what has already happened." Meanwhile, in James' house, things were not in order. James, Favor's father, couldn't bear the thought of people hearing such a story about his daughter. He felt ashamed and humiliated, and in his anger, he ordered Favor to leave his house that very night. His wife begged him, her voice trembling with tears, "Please, my husband, don't do this. She is still our daughter." But James refused to listen. His pride and anger clouded his judgment, and he drove Favor out into the dark, cold night. Isaac, on the other hand, was in his storm. After receiving a severe beating from his father, his body ached with pain, but his heart hurt even more. He couldn't bear the thought of Favor wandering alone in the night, scared and vulnerable. He knew he had to find her. Ignoring his pain, he quickly grabbed a few clothes, sneaked out of the compound, and disappeared into the night in search of her. "Favor!" Isaac shouted as he walked through the lonely street, his voice echoing in the silence. "I'm here, Isaac," Favor replied from an uncompleted building. Isaac rushed inside the uncompleted building and held Favor tightly. "I will always protect you," he said. They both stood there for some minutes, tearing up and comforting each other. As early as 5 a.m., Isaac wandered around the uncompleted building to find any eatable thing to share with Favor. It was then that his eyes caught a fairly used smartphone lying on the floor. He picked it up, thinking, maybe one of the workers has forgotten it here. He called out to Favor, "I just got a phone on the floor." "Maybe one of the workers has forgotten it here," he said. "We will keep it till it rings so that the owner can still have access to it." Back home, Mama Isaac and Mama Favor were found crying, wondering where their children could be. But their husband's decision was final. "Those children will not return here. They are a disgrace to this family," John concluded. Towards evening, the phone rang. Isaac, already used to pressing phones, had no difficulty answering it. "Hello," Isaac said. "I found this phone inside the uncompleted building opposite the cathedral house on Willie Street." "Okay, I'm coming to pick it up," the voice from the phone replied. "I pray he dashes us money for finding his phone," Favor said weakly, her voice barely audible. In less than 30 minutes, the uncompleted building was surrounded by policemen armed with guns and police dogs. The sound of their boots and the sight of their flashing lights filled the air. Isaac and Favor, looking out from a small window, became terrified. Isaac quickly turned to Favor. "Hide here," he said, pushing her gently behind some stacked blocks. "Stay here. I'll handle this." Isaac stepped outside with trembling hands, unsure of what was happening. One of the policemen pointed at him and said sternly, "You are under arrest for the kidnapping of Chief George, whose phone is in your possession." Isaac's eyes widened in shock. His mouth fell open, but no words came out. He was too stunned to defend himself. The officers didn't wait for an explanation. They grabbed him roughly, dragged him to a police car, and sped off to the station. When the area became quiet and calm, Favor slowly came out from her hiding place. Her heart sank as the reality of what had just happened hit her. "Where do I go to find Isaac? Who do I tell what happened?" she cried out. She dropped to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably, rolling in the dirt. No answers came, only silence. Wiping her tears, she resolved, "Tomorrow morning, I will go back to my family and tell them what happened. They need to know." But that same night, before Favor could leave, a new nightmare began. The kidnappers, who had been using the uncompleted building as their hideout, returned. As they entered and spotted Favor, their wicked smiles widened. They saw her as a vulnerable girl and decided to take advantage of her. Her cries were loud and desperate, but no one was there to help. She was helpless against their cruelty. Fortunately, a group of local vigilantes patrolling the area heard the commotion. They stormed the building with loud shouts, and the kidnappers fled, leaving Favor behind. The vigilantes quickly carried her out and rushed her to the nearest hospital. The news of Favor's condition reached her parents the following morning. Without wasting time, they rushed to the hospital, their hearts heavy with worry, desperate to see their daughter. Favor lay in the hospital bed, her body bruised and her spirit broken. She thought to herself, "Look at how one problem is causing so many issues. If I had known that one moment of intimacy with Isaac could lead to all this, I would have been more careful." Mama, Isaac and Favor arrived at the hospital early that morning. The air was heavy with worry as they rushed into the ward. Mama Isaac's heart broke when she saw Favor lying helplessly on the hospital bed. Her once lively face now looked pale, and her eyes were filled with tears. The sight of her daughter in such a condition was too much for Mama Favor to bear. She burst into tears, crying uncontrollably. "My husband is very wicked. He caused this to happen to Favor. If he hadn't chased her away, none of this would have happened," she wailed, her voice shaking with anger and pain. Favor lay quietly on the bed, her body weak, but her emotions strong. As soon as she saw her mother and Isaac's mother enter the room, something inside her snapped. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice was loud and angry as she screamed, "I hate you, Mom." Her words were sharp, filled with bitterness. Mama Favor looked shocked and hurt by Favor's words. "Favor, don't blame me," she pleaded. "It's your dad. He's the one who did all this. I didn't know things would turn out like this." Mama Isaac tried to calm the situation, her voice trembling as she asked, "Where is Isaac? Why isn't he here?" Favor turned her head slowly to look at Mama Isaac. Her voice was weak, but her words were clear. "He was arrested last night. The police accused him of kidnapping me," she replied, fresh tears spilling from her eyes. "No." Mama Isaac shouted in disbelief. Her voice echoed through the room. "That can't be true. Isaac is not a kidnapper." She shook her head, refusing to believe the accusation. "Which police station?" Mama Isaac asked, her voice shaking with urgency. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. "Let me call my husband," she said, reaching for her phone. She quickly dialed his number. "Hello, John, Isaac is in the state police station. He was arrested yesterday," she said in a shaky voice. "What?" John shouted on the other end of the phone, his disbelief clear in his tone. "I'm going there right away." Without wasting another moment, John grabbed his car keys and rushed out of the house. That day turned into a nightmare for both Mr. John and Mr. James's families. For years, they had shared a peaceful and close bond as twins. Their hard work and unity had been the foundation of their families. But now, all of that seemed to crumble, because of the mistake between Isaac and Favor. John arrived at the state police station with his heart heavy and his mind racing. The moment he saw Isaac, his emotions overwhelmed him. He stood there, staring at his son, regret filling every corner of his heart. Memories of that night came flooding back, the night he had chased Isaac away in anger. Now, standing before him, John could feel the weight of his actions. Tears welled up in his eyes as he thought about how things might have been different if he had shown more patience and understanding. The police officer in charge stepped forward and began to narrate the case. "Isaac is involved in a very serious matter," the officer said firmly. "We found a phone belonging to Chief George, who was kidnapped 2 months ago, in Isaac's possession. As of now, we don't know whether Chief George is alive or dead. Isaac needs to help us identify the kidnappers. Until then, he will remain in custody." John listened in stunned silence, his legs feeling weak. Hot tears rolled down his face as the officer spoke. Each word cut through his heart like a knife. He couldn't believe that his son, the same Isaac he had raised with so much care, was now caught up in such a terrible situation. As he stood there, overwhelmed with grief, John whispered to himself, "This is my fault. I shouldn't have been so selfish. If only I hadn't sent him away that night, maybe none of this would have happened." His tears continued to fall as regret consumed him. "Come back tomorrow for questioning, and we will also want you to see the chief's family and speak with them. You must provide the culprit before you can be set free," the policeman said firmly. Mr. John felt betrayed by the policeman. He wished he could help his son, but the case was too serious. He sat outside the police station, close to the premises, and cried uncontrollably. His heart was heavy, and he felt helpless. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Favor was crying for Isaac. She kept asking, "How is he doing? When will he be coming back?" Her heart was filled with worry and sadness as many questions ran through her mind. After Favor was discharged from the hospital, she refused to follow her parents home. She could not forgive them for causing the trouble that had brought so much pain to her and Isaac. Instead, she went back to the uncompleted building where she and Isaac used to meet. She stayed there every day, waiting and hoping for Isaac to come back. For the past 4 weeks, Isaac had been in the police station. Nobody came to visit him. His father didn't want to deal with the police trouble, so he stayed away. Isaac, being all alone, had to grow strong in his heart. He thought about Favor every day, wondering how she was doing. But there was no one he could ask about her. On the other hand, Favor was going through a lot. She had been falling sick over and over again. Her belly was already starting to show, but her body was very weak. By the time Favor was 6 months pregnant, things had gotten worse. She decided to go back home because she was in too much pain, and she didn't have enough food to eat. When she got home, her mother and younger sister took very good care of her, but her sickness only got worse. One morning, she fell into labor. She was rushed to the hospital, and after hours of operation to deliver, the doctor came out. "How is she doing?" Mama Favor asked anxiously. "She is fine, but we lost her baby." "The baby didn't make it," the doctor replied solemnly. It was a bad day for the family again. When Favor woke up and the event was narrated to her, she was uncontrollable. The death of her child and loss of Isaac kept her in depression for months until she ran away from home, this time acting like a mad woman. It took 1 extra year before Isaac was released from the police station. The kidnappers were finally caught, and it was proven that Isaac was innocent of the crime he was accused of. When he came out, the city looked a little different from what he remembered. The uncompleted building where he and Favor used to meet was now finished, with people living in it. Isaac began to find his way back home. He looked tired, worn out, and almost like a madman. When he finally reached his family compound, he walked in slowly. His mother was the first to recognize him. "Isaac," she shouted, tears rolling down her face. She ran to him with so much emotion. But Isaac didn't react to her tears. "Is Favor here?" he asked immediately. "No, my son," his mother replied softly. "Welcome home, Isaac. How are you?" Isaac ignored her question. "Then where is Favor?" he asked again, his voice rising with anger and fear. His mother hesitated, tears still falling from her eyes. "She lost her sense after the death of her child," she said, her voice breaking. Favor ran into the street, Daniel added, his tone heavy with sorrow. "She is nowhere to be found." Isaac clenched his fists, his face a mixture of determination and guilt. "I must find Favor. I will save her. We are meant to stay together forever," he declared, his voice filled with resolve. Without waiting for anyone's response, he walked out of the gate, his heart set on finding her, no matter the cost. Favor ran out of her home because she could not bear the pain of losing her child and the thought of never seeing Isaac again. The pain in her heart grew stronger every day, and she found a strange kind of peace sitting at the entrance of the city mall. She spent her days watching people come and go, lost in her thoughts. Sometimes, the security guards at the mall would chase her away, but she always came back. She had no other place to go. She would sit at the entrance of the mall, begging people for food or money. Some were kind and gave her something, while others ignored her or told her to leave. Back at home, her family were doing well. Her younger sister, Miracle, was in university, and their parents, Mr. James and his wife, were running a successful business. But Favor's life was different. She was suffering, living on the streets, and struggling to survive. The worst part of sleeping outside the mall was the street boys who often tried to take advantage of her. Some nights, she had to fight them off, using all her strength to protect herself. Other nights, she ran as fast as she could to escape. Life on the streets was dangerous, but she had no choice. For 2 months, Favor stayed near the mall, sitting in the same spot every day. One Sunday evening, Boza, her uncle, came shopping with his family. As they walked towards the entrance, his eyes met Favor's. He stopped and looked closely. "Is this not Favor, the daughter of Mr. James, my in-law?" he asked his wife in surprise. His wife stepped forward, looking at Favor carefully. After a moment, she nodded and said, "Yes, I remember. Her mother told me she has been missing for some time now." Uncle Boza came closer to Favor, looking at her with surprise and concern. She looked up and recognized him immediately. "Uncle Boza," she called out weakly. Boza looked at her with sadness in his eyes. "Favor, how are you? Why are you doing this to yourself?" he asked, his voice full of worry. He moved even closer, seeing how weak and tired she looked. Her clothes were dirty, and she looked like she had not eaten properly for a long time. "I will take you home and take care of you," he said gently. "I hope you will follow me?" Favor looked at him, tears filling her eyes. She had suffered so much on the streets, and hearing those kind words broke her heart. "Yes," she said softly, as tears rolled down her cheeks. "Stop crying," Uncle Boza said kindly. He took out a handkerchief and wiped her tears. "You will follow us home, take a bath, and eat. Everything will be fine." After they finished their family shopping, Uncle Boza helped Favor into his car. She sat quietly, feeling safe for the first time in a long while. With a deep breath, she watched the city pass by through the car window, knowing that she was finally going home. Uncle Boza was Favor's mother's only brother. He was a kind and responsible man, married with 2 sons, Jacob and Reuben. Jacob, the eldest, had finished university and wanted to become a reverend father. Reuben was still in university, focusing on his studies. The family was deeply religious. They were strong members of the Catholic Church and truly served God with all their hearts. Their home was filled with love, kindness, and faith, making it a safe place for anyone in need. When Uncle Boza and his wife took Favor in, they treated her with so much love and care. It had been a long time since she felt this safe. Their kindness touched her heart, and after some time, she felt comfortable enough to open up. One evening, with tears in her eyes, Favor finally shared her painful story. She told them how everything in her life changed suddenly after she saw something at home that confused and scared her, a moment between her parents that she didn't understand. She had so many questions, but didn't know who to ask. Feeling lost, she turned to Isaac, her cousin, who had always been like a brother to her. He was the only one who truly listened and cared for her. They spent a lot of time together, and he became her source of comfort. But as time passed, she started doing something wrong with Isaac, which led to pregnancy. When she was questioned, she called Isaac as responsible to her condition. Her father, being fearful about the news and how people will think about his family, became angry. He accused her of bringing shame to the family. Instead of supporting her, he pushed her away and told her to leave the house. No one stood up for her except Isaac, who remained by her side during those difficult times. But just when she thought she still had someone to rely on, something terrible happened. Isaac was taken away by the police for a crime he did not commit. He was arrested unfairly, and from that day, no one had seen him again. The pain of losing Isaac and her child, the rejection from her family, and the loneliness of being on the streets became too much for Favor to handle. She fell into deep depression and lost herself completely. She wandered the streets without hope, not knowing where to go or what to do. As she spoke, tears streamed down her face. She had held in her pain for so long, and now that she was letting it out, she could not stop crying. Aunt Eliza, Uncle Boza's wife, gently took her hands and held them tightly. She looked into Favor's eyes with warmth and kindness. "My dear, everything will be fine," she said softly. "You are safe now. We are here for you, and we will help you heal. Just trust in God." Favor looked at Aunt Eliza and nodded weakly. For the first time in a long while, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things could get better. After completing his first year at the theology school, Jacob returned home. His family was very happy to see him again. He would be staying at home for 6 months, before going back to continue his studies. When he arrived, Uncle Boza gathered everyone and introduced him to Favor properly. "She is your sister," he told Jacob. "Love her and take good care of her. When she fully recovers, we will take her back home to her parents." "Yes, Dad," Jacob nodded respectfully. He understood the responsibility his father was giving him and promised to be kind to Favor. Uncle Boza and his wife were hard-working people. They owned a car shop where they sold cars and car parts. Over the years, their business had grown, and they were always busy at the shop. Every morning, they left for work, and they usually returned home around 6 p.m. Since Favor had started feeling better, she helped out at home. One of her main responsibilities was cooking. She found joy in preparing meals for the family, and it gave her a sense of purpose. Slowly, she was starting to rebuild her life. One afternoon, while Favor was taking a bath, something unexpected happened. The bathroom door suddenly opened. She gasped in shock and quickly covered herself as Jacob stood there, looking just as surprised. "Oh, sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't know you were in here." Without waiting for a response, he quickly closed the door again. Favor stood still for a moment, feeling uneasy. But she told herself it was just a mistake. Maybe he really didn't know she was inside. She tried to push away the uncomfortable feeling and went on with her day. Later that night, while she was in her room, Jacob suddenly walked in. His face looked worried. "I'm so sorry, Favor," he said. "I didn't know you were in the bathroom earlier. Please forgive me. It was a mistake. Please, don't tell my parents." Favor looked at him and sighed. She did not want to make a big deal out of it. "Okay, no problem, Jacob. I will not tell them," she said softly. Jacob gave her a small smile, then quietly left the room. As days went by, Favor began to feel very uncomfortable in Uncle Boza's house. At first, she had felt safe and happy there, but things started to change because of Jacob. His behavior towards her was becoming a problem. Jacob was always watching her, his eyes calm but full of something that made Favor uneasy. He tried to get close to her in ways that didn't feel right, always trying to make her emotional or weaken her guard. But each time, Favor stood her ground. She refused to let him manipulate her, even though she didn't know what to do about the way he was acting. One afternoon, when everyone had gone out, Jacob found a way to take advantage of Favor. It happened so fast that she could hardly believe it. Jacob had called her and asked her to bring his food to his room. Favor hesitated. She didn't feel comfortable, but she told herself that nothing bad would happen. After all, Jacob was her cousin. There was no reason to be afraid. She prepared his food and carried it to his room. As she stepped inside, she placed the plate on his table and turned to leave. "Bro Jacob, this is your food," she said. Just as she was about to walk out, Jacob suddenly jumped from his bed and grabbed her hand. "I want you to do something for me," he said. His voice was low, but there was something in it that made Favor's heart beat faster. "What is it?" she asked, feeling nervous. "Help me remove my clothes," Jacob said. Favor's eyes widened in shock. "No, it's not possible." "I can't do that," she said firmly, trying to pull her hand away. But Jacob tightened his grip and refused to let her go. The next moments were painful and confusing. He took advantage of her, ignoring her cries and struggles. When it was over, he looked at her coldly and spoke in a harsh voice. "Let this be a secret between us," he warned. "If anyone hears about this, I will tell my dad to chase you out of this house." Favor stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. She felt broken, weak, and afraid. That afternoon, she went back to her room and locked the door. She sat on her bed, her mind filled with so many thoughts. "What do I do now?" she asked herself. "I don't want to be chased out of here. Uncle Boza and his wife have been so good to me. Where will I go if they send me away?" She thought about her parents' house. The pain of being rejected by her father was still fresh in her heart. She couldn't go back there. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she made a painful decision. Since bro Jacob will be leaving after 6 months, let me endure what he is doing to me until he leaves. With that thought, she wiped her tears, hugged herself tightly, and silently accepted her suffering. I was born to live this way, Favor whispered to herself, trying to accept her reality. She closed her eyes and fell into a deep sleep. With time, Favor had completely recovered. She was no longer weak or lost. Seeing how much she had improved, Uncle Boza and his wife decided to celebrate her recovery with a small gathering at home. You will be starting school soon, Uncle Boza announced with a smile. Favor's heart filled with joy. Thank you, sir, she replied happily. She was excited about this new chapter in her life. Uncle Boza and his wife had treated her like their own daughter, never complaining about the money they spent on her health. Their love and kindness gave her hope for a better future. But things did not go as smoothly as Favor had expected. Just when she was ready to begin school, the government withheld the salaries of the teachers. In response, the Board of Teachers decided to go on strike. What was supposed to be a short delay stretched on without an end in sight. 6 months passed, and still, there was no news about when schools would reopen. The long wait made Favor anxious, but something else troubled her even more. Jacob's behavior had not changed. In fact, it had only gotten worse. It had become a routine for him to approach Favor in ways that made her uncomfortable. Each time, she wanted to say something, to tell someone, but fear held her back. She didn't want to create problems in the family. She kept hoping that soon, school would start, and Jacob would leave. The worst moment happened on a Saturday. Uncle Boza was still around, but he was busy at home, unaware of what was happening. Favor had gone to take her bath, trying to clear her mind. As she stood under the water, lost in thought, she suddenly heard the bathroom door open. Her body stiffened as she turned to see Jacob sneaking in. He whispered, pressing a finger to his lips. Fear shot through Favor. She tried to move, but he leaned her against the wall and took advantage of her. Afterwards, he quickly sneaked out, leaving her feeling broken and helpless. Favor sat in her room later that day, her heart heavy with emotions. School seemed like it would never reopen, and life in Uncle Boza's home was becoming unbearable. She stared at the door, lost in thought. Should I tell Aunt about this? She wondered. But what if no one believed her? What if it caused problems in the family? Fear filled her heart, and for the first time, she felt truly trapped. The long-awaited announcement finally came, schools were reopening. Joy filled Favor's heart. Finally, this nightmare will end, she thought to herself. The best part was that bro Jacob would be going back to theological school, and she would be starting school too. Uncle Boza and his wife sat her down one evening and made a promise that brought even more happiness to her heart. We will train you till university level, Uncle Boza said with a warm smile. Tears of gratitude filled Favor's eyes. Thank you so much, sir, Ma. I will never disappoint you, she said happily. At least, she would be free from Jacob. That alone brought her peace. A few weeks later, bro Jacob finally left home to continue his theological studies and work towards becoming a priest. The house felt lighter without him, and Favor could finally breathe freely. She was soon registered to sit for her senior secondary school exams. She studied hard, determined to make Uncle Boza and his wife proud. After her exams, instead of staying idle at home, Uncle Boza arranged for her to learn sewing at one of the best tailor shops in the city. It was a great opportunity, and Favor was excited to gain a new skill while waiting for her exam results. Around the same time, Reuben, Uncle Boza's second son, returned home after completing his exams. Unlike Jacob, Reuben was different. He was deeply committed to his faith. A devoted pastor, he spent most of his time reading the Bible and preaching the gospel. When Uncle Boza introduced him to Favor, Reuben smiled warmly and accepted her as his sister without hesitation. You are welcome here, Favor, he said kindly. You are part of this family. Unlike Jacob, Reuben treated her with respect and kindness. He often encouraged her to join him in church and grow in her faith. "You should come to church with me," he would say. "God is always ready to heal and restore." Favor found comfort in his words. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly safe and at peace. At first, Favor feared that Bro Reuben would be like his brother Jacob. She worried that he might treat her the same way. But as time passed, she realized that Reuben was completely different. He was kind, respectful, and always ready to help. In the mornings, he assisted her with cooking before she left for her apprenticeship at the tailor shop. In the evenings, he always invited her to go to church with him. Through Reuben, Favor saw that good people still existed. For the first time, she truly believed that there were kind and perfect humans on the surface of the earth. Time passed, and soon, Jacob completed his studies at the theology school. The day of his inauguration arrived, a grand event where he and over 200 young priests would be anointed as Reverend Fathers. His parents, along with Reuben and Favor, traveled from their city to Willie Parish, where the ceremony was taking place. The journey was long, but it was a proud moment for Uncle Boza and his wife. Their son was about to become a priest, a man of God. The church was filled with people. Family members, friends, and priests from different places had gathered to witness the occasion. The air was solemn, filled with prayers and chants. One by one, the young priests stepped forward to be anointed. Each time, the presiding bishop laid hands on them, blessing them into their new calling. Then, it was Jacob's turn. He walked forward slowly, his face pale, his steps unsure. The bishop placed his hands on Jacob's head and spoke. "Young man, what is your name?" Jacob swallowed hard. His voice was shaky as he answered, I'm Jacob Boza." A moment of silence followed, and something in the air changed. The moment was tense. The whole church fell silent as the presiding bishop looked at Jacob with piercing eyes. "You have done something in the past that is hurting you now," the bishop said. "The Holy Spirit cannot choose you as his servant. Go and confess, and be free from your evil ways." The words hit Jacob like thunder. His legs felt weak, and his face turned pale. "You are not chosen," the bishop declared. A loud gasp filled the church. Out of the 200 young priests present for the inauguration, only Jacob was rejected. Uncle Boza and his family sat frozen in shock. Shame covered their faces. They had traveled all this way, filled with pride, only to witness their son being turned away in front of everyone. Jacob, trying to defend himself, spoke quickly. "I am being set up," he said, his voice shaking. "My colleagues don't want me to become a reverend father. This is their plan to disgrace me." But no one said anything. His words felt empty. The journey back home was filled with silence. Uncle Boza was lost in thought. After all the training, prayers, and money he had spent on Jacob, his son was coming back home with nothing. That night, Uncle Boza finally broke the silence. He looked straight at his son. "What confession do you need to make?" he asked. Jacob clenched his fists. "I have no confession to make. I was set up." "That priest is stupid," he shouted in anger. Without waiting for a response, he stormed into his room, slamming the door behind him. Reuben sat quietly, unable to understand why his brother had been rejected. But Favor knew. "It must be because of what he did to me," she thought. "His past is catching up with him." For so long, she had kept quiet. She had endured everything, hoping that once Jacob left for theological school, she would be free. But now, he was back, and things were only getting worse. As days passed, Jacob's behavior started again. He began trying to lure Favor once more, looking for ways to get close to her. But this time, she was stronger. She stood her ground. "Stop this, bro Jacob," she said firmly. "I am not the same person I was before." Jacob's face darkened. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Oh, so you are stopping me now?" he sneered. "I will deal with you. I will send you out of my parents' house." His words sent a shiver down Favor's spine, but she refused to be afraid. That evening, Favor sat with Reuben and finally spoke her truth. "Bro Reuben," she began, her voice trembling. "There is something I need to tell you." Reuben turned to her, concerned. "What is it, Favor?" Tears welled up in her eyes as she took a deep breath. "Bro Jacob took advantage of me while he was at home for over a year. He threatened to chase me out of this house if I told Mom or Dad," she said, her voice cracking. "Because I wanted a good life, I stayed silent. I never told anyone. Now he is back again, and when I refused him, he threatened me again." Reuben's heart pounded. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. His own brother had been doing this to their cousin? He felt anger, sadness, and guilt all at once. "You should have spoken up, Favor," he said, his voice filled with regret. "No matter the threats, you should have told someone." Favor looked down, ashamed. "I was afraid," she whispered. Reuben took her hands gently. "Nothing will happen to you," he reassured her. "Jacob will not chase you out. We will take time to fast and pray. God will expose him, and he will heal you." For the first time, Favor felt a sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things would finally change. Reuben knew that only God could bring true justice and healing. He decided to organize a 3-day fasting and prayer session with Favor. Their only request was simple: God, expose Jacob and heal Favor. For 3 days, they fasted, praying morning and night. The prayers were deep, filled with tears and faith. Favor cried out to God to take away her pain, while Reuben prayed for the truth to come to light. On the 3rd day, they decided to take an extra step. They visited the bishop of their church, asking for special prayers. The bishop laid his hands on them and prayed for deliverance, healing, and the exposure of all hidden secrets. 1 week after their prayers, something unexpected happened. Early one morning, Jacob called for a family meeting. Uncle Boza, his wife, Reuben, and Favor all gathered, wondering what was so urgent. Jacob stood before them, looking weak and shaken. His voice trembled as he spoke. "I have something to confess," he said, his eyes filled with guilt. "I have done terrible things." The room fell silent. Everyone listened closely. He took a deep breath and continued. "I have been having strange dreams. In my sleep, I see myself being flogged over and over again, a voice commanding me to confess my sins. I can't bear it anymore. I need to tell the truth." Jacob turned to Favor, his face full of shame. "I was wrong," he admitted. "I did terrible things to you. I took advantage of you, and I threatened you. I have been carrying this burden for so long, and now I realize that I was evil. Please, forgive me." Uncle Boza and his wife sat in shock. They were deeply disappointed but, at the same time, grateful that their son finally spoke the truth. Jacob dropped to his knees in front of Favor. "I beg you, Favor," he said, tears rolling down his face. "Please forgive me for all I have done." Favor looked at him, her heart heavy with emotions. She had waited so long for this moment, but now that it was here, she didn't know how to feel. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I have forgiven you," she said softly. "Every bad word I spoke against you, may the Lord remove them." The room was filled with silence. It was a moment of deep reflection for the family. Reuben stepped forward, his heart full of gratitude. He picked up his Bible and began to lead a praise and worship session. "Let us thank God," he said, lifting his hands. "He has answered our prayers. He has exposed Jacob, and he has healed Favor." The family joined in, singing and worshiping together. The house, once filled with secrets and pain, was now filled with the sound of praises. It was a new beginning. A moment of healing. A time to move forward. Favor's exam results were finally released, and the news was better than she ever imagined. She had passed with flying colors. But there was an even bigger surprise. She had been awarded a scholarship to study in the United States. When she heard the news, she couldn't believe it. Tears of joy filled her eyes. She ran to Uncle Boza and his wife, fell to her knees, and held their hands tightly. "Thank you, sir." "Thank you, Ma," she said, her voice full of gratitude. "You never gave up on me. You gave me a home, love, and education. God bless you both." Uncle Boza and his wife smiled proudly. "You deserve it, my dear," Uncle Boza said. "You have worked hard, and this is your reward. Just promise us one thing, make us proud." Favor wiped her tears and nodded. "I promise. No matter what happens, I will not disappoint you." As Favor prepared to leave for her studies, things were also changing for the rest of the family. Jacob had secured a job in a big oil company in the city. The salary was huge, and he was finally on a better path in life. Meanwhile, Reuben made a bold decision. He answered the call to become a reverend father in place of his brother. The day of his inauguration was filled with happiness and celebration. Friends, family, and church members gathered to witness the proud moment. "He is a channel of deliverance for his family," one of their neighbors whispered. Uncle Boza beamed with pride. "I am proud of you, my son," he said, placing a hand on Reuben's shoulder. Favor smiled at Reuben, her heart full of appreciation. "Thank you, Father Reuben," she said. "I will always remember your kindness to me." Reuben smiled. "Go and shine, Favor. You are meant for greatness." His mother hugged him tightly. "Well done, my son," she said. "You are a blessing to our family." Jacob, now more mature and responsible, also spoke. "Thank you, bro," he said. "You are a light to this family." A few weeks later, it was time for Favor to leave the country. Favor decided to visit her parents before leaving for the United States. She had been away for a long time, and now that she had received a scholarship to study in the U.S., she wanted to see them again. That day, Uncle Boza and his wife drove into the compound with Favor. The place was quiet, with no sign of activity. They walked to the door and knocked. A moment later, Mr. James, Favor's father, opened the door. When he saw Favor standing there, he was shocked. His eyes widened in disbelief, and for a moment, he couldn't speak. The silence was heavy, and no one knew what to say. Uncle Boza finally broke the silence. "This is Favor, your daughter. She has been with us for a long time now. She got a scholarship to study in the U.S., so we came to see you," he said. At that moment, tears filled Mr. James' eyes. His wife, who had just come to the door, also began to cry. They could not believe what they were hearing. The child they had once abandoned, the daughter they had forsaken, was now on her way to America with a scholarship. Overcome with emotion, Mr. James fell to his knees before Favor. His voice trembled as he spoke. "I know I have wronged you," he said. "I rejected you when you made a mistake. I did not love you like a father should. Please, forgive me." His tears fell to the ground as he begged for her forgiveness. Favor looked at her father with a mixture of sadness and understanding. "Daddy," she said softly, "Uncle Boza saw me at the entrance of the city mall and took me home. He cared for me and treated me like his own child, not minding what I had done. You should thank him because he saved my life." Mr. James turned to Uncle Boza, his heart heavy with regret. He realized that the man standing before him had done what he had failed to do, love and protect his own daughter. As the emotions filled the air, the past could not be changed, but a new beginning was possible. Favor's mother wiped her tears and smiled at her daughter. "Your sister Miracle is in the university now," she said. "She will be graduating soon." Favor's face lit up with joy. "What about Uncle John and his family? And what about Isaac?" she asked, turning to her father, eager to know about the people she had left behind. "They are fine," her father replied. "Isaac has been released. He now manages his father's car shop, while his brother Daniel is in the university too. Isaac will be so happy to see you." Favor nodded thoughtfully. "Let's go to his shop and see him since I will be traveling tomorrow," she said. Mr. James and his wife felt a mix of happiness and guilt. They were happy that their daughter had returned and was no longer lost, but at the same time, they felt ashamed. They had let their anger control them in the past, and now they saw how wrong they had been. Uncle Boza, who had always been Favor's protector, agreed to take her to see Isaac. He drove her to the car shop, and as soon as they arrived, Favor stepped out of the car, her heart pounding with excitement and nervousness. The moment they entered the shop, Isaac looked up and immediately recognized her. His eyes widened, and without thinking, he ran toward her, his face filled with joy. With tears in his eyes, he jumped on Favor, hugging her tightly. "How are you, Favor? Where have you been?" he asked, his voice shaking with emotion. So many questions flooded his mind, but he couldn't ask them all at once. At that moment, all that mattered was that Favor was back. Isaac, still overwhelmed with joy and surprise, quickly offered them seats. He hurried to get cool drinks, wanting them to relax and feel comfortable. As they sat down, Favor took a deep breath and began to explain everything that had happened. "Uncle Boza found me at the entrance of the mall," she said, looking at Isaac with a grateful smile. "He took me home and cared for me until I recovered. He didn't just give me shelter, he made sure I continued my education. And now, because of his kindness, I have received a scholarship to study abroad." Isaac listened carefully, his eyes filled with admiration and emotion. He turned to Uncle Boza and said, "Wow. Thank you, Uncle Boza. Thank you for saving Favor." His voice was filled with sincerity and deep appreciation. Favor took a deep breath and continued, her voice soft but steady. "I will be traveling to the US to further my education on scholarship," she said. "I just came to see you for the last time before I leave." As those words sank in, silence filled the room. A deep sadness settled between them, knowing that this could be their final meeting. Tears rolled down their faces as they looked at each other, remembering all the moments they had shared in the past. Isaac's voice broke as he spoke. "I will always love you, Favor," he said, pulling her into a warm, tight hug. He didn't want to let go, but he knew he had to. Favor wiped her tears and gave him a small, sad smile. "Bye, Isaac," she said softly, stepping back and turning towards the door. As she walked away, Isaac stood still, watching her leave, his heart was full of joy and grateful. The night before her flight, Uncle Boza and his wife called her into their room. They sat her down and gave her some final words of advice. "You are going far away," Uncle Boza said, "but never forget your roots. Stay focused, work hard, and always put God first." His wife added, "And remember, no matter where you are, you will always have a home here with us." Favor nodded, holding back tears. "I will never forget. Thank you for everything." The next day, at the airport, the whole family gathered to see her off. They hugged tightly, tears rolling down their cheeks. As Favor walked towards the boarding gate, she turned back one last time, waving at them. "Bye, Uncle," she called out. The plane took off, and as she looked out the window, tears streamed down her face. She was leaving behind a family that had loved her as their own. But she was also stepping into a bright future, one she would never take for granted. The story teaches us one. Kindness and compassion can change lives. Uncle Boza and his wife took Favor in when she had nowhere to go. Their kindness gave her a new life and future. This teaches us that helping others in need can make a lasting impact. 2. The power of confession and repentance. Jacob's past mistakes followed him until he confessed. Keeping secrets and wrongdoing can bring guilt and suffering. True freedom comes from admitting our faults and seeking forgiveness. 3. God's justice always prevails. Despite his efforts to hide the truth, Jacob was exposed at the right time. This shows that no matter how long it takes, justice will always prevail. 4. Education is a life-changer. Favor's scholarship to study abroad was a reward for her hard work and resilience. Education opened doors for her, proving that knowledge and determination can lead to a brighter future. 5. Forgiveness brings healing. Even though Favor was deeply hurt, she chose to forgive Jacob. Forgiveness does not erase the past, but it allows one to heal and move forward. 6. True character is revealed over time. Favor initially feared Reuben would be like Jacob, but he proved to be different. This teaches us not to judge people based on past experiences with others, but to observe their actions. 7. Faith and prayer can change situations. Reuben and Favor fasted and prayed for the truth to come out, and in the end, Jacob confessed. This shows the power of faith and trusting God to handle difficult situations. 8. Stand up for yourself and speak out. Favor endured a lot in silence because of fear. However, when she finally spoke up to Reuben, she found support and healing. This teaches us to speak out against wrongdoings and seek help. 9. Every setback is a setup for a comeback. Favor's life was filled with struggles, but she never gave up. In the end, she succeeded and was given a scholarship. This proves that tough times do not last, but strong people do. 10. Family is not just by blood, but by love. Uncle Boza and his wife treated Favor as their own child, proving that family is not only about being related by blood, but about love, care, and support. This story reminds us that no matter the hardships we face, with kindness, faith, and determination, we can rise above our past and build a better future.